We're just dealing with a small technical issue.
Tiempo de networking, que no es exactamente un catering, como
So, we've just enjoyed a short break, opportunity for networking, and it's time now to kick off this next session. Our panel now will talk about sustainable transformation, governance and social innovation.
Este panel, en el contexto de nuestro tema central,
in the context of our main issue, they will be talking about how to encourage participatory processes, involve civil society, develop networks for collaboration and cooperation between public and private entities, private and public. These are all elements of social capital that help to create processes in a united way and in the long term. We're also going to talk about the perspective of different territories, specific challenges, difficulties when it comes to the issue of resilience. So we'll talk about participatory governance, decentralization in decision-making, social innovation, which was also mentioned in the previous panel. But now we're going to be talking about this issue in the context of cohesion and eco-social transformation. This panel will be moderated by Natalia Valls. She is an environmental expert and educator for transformation. She has a degree in social sciences. She has a very wide-ranging CV. And she's worked a great deal with the university on many projects to do with education innovation, for instance, Blue App, Ingenia, and Talentum Future are three examples. She's also been a mentor for projects all over the country. And is going to be a key figure for the talent of the future of our island here, Tenerife. So Natalia will moderate this panel of veterans. She will introduce the other speakers, Vicente Zapata, Cristina Suarez and Vanessa Armendaris. Well, thank you, Carlos, for that introduction. I want to say, first of all, thank you to the panelists for accompanying us in this final panel. Sustainable Transformation, Governance and Social Innovation is the title. These individuals have very different individual and professional trajectories, but they share something in common, and that's that they work with people for people. In a video meeting we had some time ago, we talked about how lucky we felt to be able to take part in this panel and offer not necessarily data and figures, but rather to focus on how important it is to be patient with processes and to create worthwhile links with all involved actors. So, as Carlos said, we're going to be talking about collective intelligence, public governance, community development, and I'm sure that all of our participants will give us a lot of very valuable inputs. They are all working very hard to transform our territory and fighting to transform what we are simply unable to accept. So first of all, Vicente Hernandez Zapata, he's a doctor in geography, researcher and tenured professor of human geography here at the University of La Laguna, director of OBI-10, the Immigration Observatory of Tenerife, and he directs many different projects of community invention and social innovation. and he works alongside the General Foundation of the University of La Laguna. He has worked a great deal on planning of social policies, social participation, and training of professors as well. He's the director of the Canarias Convive program. He's also a researcher on the project Participa Barrio, where he drives citizen participation in multicultural neighbourhoods. He received an award for transfer of knowledge from the Social Council of the University of La Laguna, and he's received the Alonso de Nava Award for his scientific and professional career with a high degree of social commitment. He's also a member of the Ashoka Foundation network of drivers of change. So welcome and thank you for being here, Vicente. I'll introduce now Cristina Suarez Lacalle, who's joining us today from Gran Canaria. She has a degree in philosophy, a master in management action, and she's an expert in governance and citizen participation. She's also a professor and founder of the LPA Studio and director of the Instituto 20 Grados. She's specialised in participatory processes linked to the territory and public spaces and creating sustainable and resilient communities and cities. She directs Mi Plaza, which is a company that facilitates processes of social participation that are necessary for the collective construction of our communities, neighbourhoods and cities. They develop technologies and apply innovative methodologies to achieve their objectives in a participatory way, always. Thank you, Cristina, for being here. And finally, we have an international panelist here, Vanessa Almendarez Sanchez. She works in the Sustainability Lab in New York. She's also worked in Norway as well, and she is involved with strategic decision making in the Radboud University in the Netherlands. And she also works with the Institute for Strategic Clarity in Boston in the US. For the past 10 years, she's also been an active participant of a community of strategic thinking. She is part of the Women's Network for Planetary Health, regional advisor of the Climate Labs initiative between the European Commission and the regional governments of Latin America, which is where she is originally from and where she's travelled from today. Her professional career has focused on designing projects to promote agreements for governance that address urgent systemic change. She has worked a great deal with IOL, the Worldwide Fund, and many governments, always focusing on the impact and philanthropy. She focuses on circularity, sustainability to try to build community. So thank you, Vanessa, for being here as well. I'm sorry I had to read these out, these CVs. There was a lot of detail there for me to have to memorize. I would like to break with tradition, if everyone is okay with it, and begin with a question that we think may serve as inspiration for everyone here, particularly the young people that are here. They're sitting at the back row in the room, but we think they should be sitting up here at the front with us, really. We may not be able to leave you a better world for the future generations, but we hope to at least create excellent people and leaders for the future. So I'd like you to give us a little bit of background on all of your careers to date. Well, I don't want to go against what Carlos Fernandez said. I think he's more of a veteran than I am. As we've just said, there's lots of students here in this room. We're in a university. And so I would have to go back to the year 1989 to start talking about my career, the beginnings of my career in this year. Some people at the University of La Laguna studying went to La Palma Island. We were abandoned there for a year to work on something called Indoplan. It was an operation to work in direct contact with local actors on the island. The idea was to create agreements, new structures to build a common project. My master's, I always say, was completed between the years 1989 and 1990 in La Palma. That was where I really learned how to work at territory level, to work alongside real people, to work in quite a complex territory with lots of challenges and lots of things that were lacking, lots of shortages. This was part of a European project, the LEADER project, and it was a great opportunity to create this project which focused on rural development. With a local action group there, we learned a great deal about how these groups work. Later on, more and more local action groups were created in the Canary Islands. I was surprised to realize that at a public university, a great deal of things can be done, actually. We can work on the ground alongside people, organizations, working to progress, to achieve progress for everybody. And I've never forgotten what I learned during that year in La Palma throughout my whole career. Good afternoon. I would also like to say thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes. I was waiting for a light bulb moment just now, but that's not very common in me. Things are a little bit more chaotic in my brain. We take decisions as we go through life the best we can. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but I've always had a bit of a chaotic way of leading my life. But anyway, in my architectural planning office some years ago, we realized that the way that we inhabit our territory is dependent on plans, guidelines, projects that define this common space. This word common we've heard a lot this morning. This common thing that appears to belong to everybody. We meet each other there, we coexist there, and it determines our life, our coexistence. We saw how important these spaces were during the pandemic, for instance. So that's very important, but it's also clear that the decisions that are taken, that govern these spaces, are taken in offices by so-called experts that receive instructions, political instructions, and they create this project, this plan. And sometimes they execute these plans. We're lucky if they do. The plan has a duration in time, but sometimes the designs don't actually come to fruition as they were originally planned. In many places, there are no meeting places anymore. There are just transition spaces. I'm talking here about the plaza, the main square of a town where our grandparents always went to meet with their other neighbours, something that's been very common sense throughout history, but that's often something that we don't have these days. And so, realizing this, we started to launch these participatory processes with our work. I'm not sure if you yourselves have participated in some of these things, but you might have, and if you have, you might realize that they are sometimes quite frustrating. Well, in any case, that was briefly how we ended up working in this area. Thank you, Christina. Vanessa, please. Hi, I'm Vanessa Armendáriz. I'm from the north of Mexico, a city called Monterrey. So what motivated me to work in this area? I'm 37 years old now, and around 17 years ago I was studying at university just like you, and the war against drug traffickers in Mexico began. And this changed our lives radically. Imagine we're sitting here quietly and suddenly we start hearing gunshots go off outside. Students start to disappear. Parents are suddenly taken away in the middle of the night. And, well, at this time I was studying social sciences, and I began to understand why this was all happening. I came across some engineering books that talked about system dynamics, and I realized this was going to be useful for me for my thesis to explain what's happening. Industrial cities are destroying nature, extractive industries are destroying nature, and this is level 1, I suppose, but later, when your own life is in danger, when there are mass shootings, this is really when life begins to lose all sense and death becomes normalized. So this book about system dynamics was very inspirational, and I decided to specialize in this area. Today, I try to drive and create collaborative government structures. So what is this? I want to show you briefly. Noemi talked a little bit about this yesterday, actually. The Earth for All study is the follow-up to the study that Noemi talked about yesterday. I think it's something we should all read to understand our current context. The most developed model is this, Earth for All. What it tells us is that we are located right now around where this blue line is, and we can see that in less than 5 years' time we're going to be along this grey line that I'm showing you here. And this second grey line shows the average rate of well-being. So it's expected that in 5 years' time we will see a significant drop in well-being, a shortage in access to basic services. In just 15 years' time we will see this drop. There will also be an increase in inequality and social tension, and an increase in population. look at this growth here, this very pronounced line, this drop again in around 15 years. The amount of people living on less than $1 a day will grow exponentially. And these are all things that we are going to experience in our lives. This war is still being fought. I'm sure you've heard about these huge mass graves. And I began to think perhaps this has something to do with energy. And indeed it did. We had energy reform 3 years later in Mexico. So we are going in the future to experience things that we're not prepared for. Carol Sanford is a pioneer in regenerative thinking, and she said, you are going to experience, all of us here are going to experience things that we're not prepared for. Nobody has prepared us for them. And we have to act like an elite army, but we have one bullet. So, why do I do what I do? Well, because the administrative structures that exist, the way we make decisions, the state in itself has is hugely lacking in capacity to be able to deal with what is ahead of us. Everything is going to change. And we need to accelerate innovation. We need to start to seize these scientific tools. And we need to do it now, not in 6 months' time. So what motivated me was this event and the fact that we really have very little time at our disposal. And I've studied a lot, done a lot so far in my life. And it was when we were in La Palma in the GSF, more or less, that I came to the realization that no one was going to save anything, but life gives you wisdom. Biology helps us, maths, physics, they all help us to learn about our lives. We need to bring all of this knowledge into our designs for education, for infrastructure. And that's what I'm doing with my life. Thank you, Vanessa. I think what you are saying is quite right. This is a moment of crisis, an unprecedented crisis. And it seems perhaps overwhelming when we try to think about how to approach these crises. We have to work in a coordinated way across all sectors with all people. But you, 3 of you, have all approached your professions with very clear visions. And I would like to hear more about those visions. These visions about how we can address these challenges that we saw in this very terrifying graph that Vanessa just showed us. I'd like to hear about your specific focus points in your current work and perhaps offer us specific examples that can help us to understand and help to inspire us. Oh, thank God I didn't look at that graph behind me. I'm sure I would have started sweating. Well, for us, we began to work in what we call identifying the potential of territories. And then we started to ask ourselves, who should mobilize that potential? We came up with the idea that it should be the communities themselves that mobilize their own potential. And for that reason, it's important that we strengthen communities and encourage them to be involved in key moments so that we can mobilize all of these different elements that sometimes they're not even aware that they possess. And so, from a scientific perspective and also from our work on the ground, we came up with some conceptual frameworks. Marco Marchioni is one professional who is very much in line with what we believe and what we do working with communities. And so we wanted to try and offer support to these processes, help to build relationships between very diverse people. The people that inhabit a territory are often very varied. They come from different places, they interact more or less than others. And we wanted to help these individuals, varied individuals, to be able to reach their potential. So, it's about working with very specific territories in a gradual way, because processes need time. We need time to learn lessons, for knowledge to sink in, for people to understand that they won't be substituted by other people. I've brought one example here today. Christina was trying to have a sneak peek at it, but just a short time ago, we were interacting with the University of La Laguna and the government of the Canary Islands, and 8 neighbourhoods, one on every island. We work with small communities and only over 6 to 9 months in duration, so a short time period. But from their specific experiences and their desire to change and to improve things, we were able, I'm very happy to say, to create a set of methodological tools that would help us to really reach the people. We built these tools, but oftentimes when we design these tools, they don't really reach the people that they're designed to reach. So in the Canary Islands, for instance, we've been working a lot on Agenda 2030, and I always say that we need to land it. We need to get it to reach beyond the municipality level, but also neighbourhood level. So, these 8 neighbourhoods, neighbourhoods and towns, villages, with the local action groups that we were working with, we put together this guidebook. It's called a guidebook to transform our neighbourhood or village. We laid out a set of recommendations that might be useful so that any community can create this reaction to try and be the protagonists of their own change, their own processes of change. I'll give the floor to Natalia in a second, but I want to share another example, and that is with our work with the metropolitan area of Tenerife. For many years now, we've been working in La Cuesta and Taco, these neighbourhoods, working with increasingly community-focused programs. Many years ago, we started on the neighborhood plans, trying to ensure they had infrastructure, facilities, services that they didn't have, and dignified living spaces, etc. There was an intercultural intervention program. We worked on citizen science, working hand in hand with the neighbours of these two neighbourhoods. And I learned a great deal throughout this process. A great deal of knowledge has been created, helping those residents to understand their living spaces better, helping them to build or design tools that might be helpful, and identifying what needed to be improved. So through these processes, and this is something I'm going to repeat many times today, I know there are professors and students of the university here. During these processes, there is a place for universities. We should actually be present in these processes, offering support, enabling these processes, also offering conceptual ideas, helping with the to and fro exchange of ideas, and also we have a role when it comes to the conclusions that come out of those processes. So I just wanted to contrast those two ideas, these very short-term processes, and then being committed in the long term to a territory, offering something valuable for that community.
Thank you so much, Christina. You have the floor now if you want to share some examples or comments. Oh yeah, yesterday's session, today, this morning, and also with this graph you've just seen on the screen. It leads us to become a bit of radical pessimists. You might wonder, well, what, I can't do anything at all. This is, we're doomed either way. However, I would like to transmit an idea that is somehow therapeutical. We can always find a bit or a small square meter of change, of transformation. When you feel like everything is doomed, like anything you do won't have any result at all, please try to find this square meter of transformation. And if you can't find it, then look for someone else who has. Maybe some topics that might encourage you, that might make you look forward to the future. We can talk about sustainability, about innovation. In fact, I was talking to Pedro before, and innovation, it might not be changing everything, but just improving the way we do things. If we want to create a radical innovation, we need to look at everything through a different lens. Well, now I would like to share one example of urban planning we are especially proud of because we had the necessary time and the necessary resources to do what we aimed for. Maybe you know the municipality of Santa Brígida. It's quite small, it's more rural. In Gran Canaria there is a small city center, and it also has over 15,000, a parcel of 15,000 square meters. It's like it exists, that space, that empty space, has existed for 26 years now because they wanted to build a mall there. They started building the parking lot under that mall, and in the end it was an action that managed to stop it. That space had been the meeting point of the people of the community. There was a space for playing football, soccer. Everyone knew, they went with the children there, and they knew they would meet on the weekends and would know how everyone was doing. However, they took that space from them, and they changed it completely. And as I was saying, it just became an abandoned space for over 20 years. It had some mesh around it, so nobody could access it. Anyone who was younger than 26 years old didn't know how useful and how alive that space had been in the past. The city council and the island government decided, okay, let's see, maybe we can ask for some citizens' participation and maybe we can do something with it. However, maybe some of these initiatives end up as a failure. People become encouraged and motivated, and then they see that it was all for naught, so they become discouraged. However, we found a new model of doing things. If it's a participatory process, they need to not only participate, but there needs to be results. We should ask for them to participate, not to only write down a report and then just keep it somewhere and forget about it. No, we need to show them the results that their participation has. And that's what we aimed for with this project. We try to use this general knowledge and intelligence in order to create a final proposal. And what did it mean to us to create this common space? Well, we needed the 3 key legs for this participatory process. The managing department, the policymakers department, not only those running the government at the time, but also those opposing that government. We want these decisions to happen on the long term. They need to come to an agreement, to at least agree on the bare minimum, so that it can survive over time. We also want this technical team that guarantees the technical feasibility of the project. We need those technical experts and also the citizens. At the beginning, it might seem quite easy. However, it is not. Politicians usually know what people want. However, they work for 4 years and they do not want to risk their jobs. So usually they tell us not to change too many things at once. The technical teams, the experts tell us, well, I know what we need to do. Please let me do my job on my own. I have way too much to do, and I don't want to be now involved in other more bothersome projects. So leave me alone. So yeah, as you can see, the first responses weren't easy. People telling us, no, this road has to go through here. So once we have the technicians there to tell us, no, that's not feasible. Conversation over. Done. Well, that's the answer. How are we going to move forward? And then we have the other kind of response. Well, I don't know about this. I cannot contribute in any way. Well, you are an expert on experiences. You're the expert on how we should create life here in this space, how we should really reinvigorate it. You are the one who has to tell us what you need for this space to be livable. It's absolutely necessary for a project to work, to adjust it to the people who are going to use it. How are we going to develop a project of life? For example, you want to have a family. You want to grow older in a dignified way. You want also to have a dignified death. As you can see, we get many different responses. The first step is always to convince them. We try to define this process, this participatory process, and look at who is going to take part in it. We invite all the stakeholders that might be affected by our decisions during this process. In this case, we invited the whole municipality. However, that was quite overwhelming. So we had a chance, which we don't always have, to have enough time, enough resources to rent a space so that anyone who was interested in our project could come, visit us, learn about the projects. We had different information panels. We also went to schools, to other types of citizen centers, and one of the results was the following one. Maybe in this space we could also have a farmers market or not. And this was quite a debated hot topic between the different governors. And then we wondered, wait, shouldn't we ask the farmers directly? And their answer was, no, we don't need to be there. However, we do want this space to be connected to ours. We want to have a great space where we maybe can have a taxi, leave someone who can't walk, an elderly person who maybe cannot walk there. Maybe we can have some sort of other services. Well, in the end, we see that the citizens were the ones who could tell us what they needed. We already had a farmers market which was successful. It was working all right. So they didn't need for that to be moved as the governors were thinking. Thanks to that, we developed a strategy for this small town. We had 3 squares and a boulevard that connected to the main road. And bit by bit, we were creating this network, this space. However, when I say space, I don't mean that we would take all the stakeholders and just put them in one room. No, usually we would have lists, we would sell them newsletters about what we were doing, we would ask them if they thought something was feasible or not. And bit by bit, we were creating this common space and also building this collective intelligence, which is always more than the sum of its parts. We have maybe an emergency situation, but this is like the magical touch that then created this vision that could be materialized, that could be understood. The people involved, all the stakeholders, were part of this. And at the end, we asked them, do you think that the time you've invested in our project has been worth it? That we have reflected what you have told us? And one of the biggest gifts we got from the project is that more than 90% of the people we asked answered yes, definitely. So this process worked. Perfect. So now we can give ourselves a pat on the back and just go back home. Well, no, the challenge is for this process to continue. Participation can just, it's not a linear process. It doesn't start here and end there. No, it continues. When we go somewhere and we intervene in their common spaces, we are starting something. The party has already started. We're actually joining the party. And when we leave, we need to make sure that the conditions are the same, so that the party can continue. So we are very proud of this project, and whether it was successful or not, well, maybe next time I can tell you more about it. Yeah, we have to trust the process. Thank you. Vanessa, you have the floor now. I really loved what Christina just said, to also invite the opposition parties to participate in these projects. What we try to do, we have this approach where we try to use these science but also awareness tools so that the different sectors can connect on something significant to them, but also on a practical scale. How does change work within these ecosystems? How does change happen? And here you can see a small cartoon. We use 3 approaches: systemic approach, governance, and systemic thought processes. So, on the systemic thought processes, imagine we are on a boat sailing across the ocean. This systemic approach process will show us a map where sharks might be, or where there is an island where we can find resources. If we want to start a transformation process, first I need to learn about the territory, about the land. From this life perspective, the land is deeply linked with how the different sectors are talking to each other and how they're interacting, what the government is doing, what the different stakeholders are carrying out. And in another part, we have this governance. If I have to sail through an ocean with this systemic thought, which are the tools we have, we understand the land better. Then maybe I realize I don't need a sailing boat, I need a plane or an U-boat. So in the end, governance responds to what we need to be, who we need to be. Maybe I need to work with the government. Maybe I need to create a different collaborative network. What type of ship do I need? Who do I need to be? Maybe we need to wonder about what the vehicle I'm going to use, but also who is going to be on that vehicle with me. And this, in yellow, is this systemic strategy. I see the land and what it looks like. I've decided who I am. Maybe I need to work with the government, maybe I need to work with other stakeholders, and later on I need to create a strategy. Strategy lets us know where we have to go. Do you see that star in the sky of that cartoon? This purpose, our colleagues from Islas Responsables mentioned, that purpose. When we create a strategy, we always start by thinking about the purpose. If we're trying to solve problems and create projects to solve problems, we won't have enough resources. However, it's very strategic to start by thinking about the purpose and what conditions we need to design in order to cross that ocean with the boat we need and with whom we need to be there. And that's how this process works. Usually, when we work together, we work in this paradigm of organizing something. Maybe we need to respond to an issue, to a problem. We are problem solvers. We are just counter or responding or reacting to a problem. That's one of the paradigms. And another paradigm is that we're trying to do something good. We're doing this because then these communities are going to live better. Or maybe we have a sustainable development project for this community. So we are outside those communities trying to do good by these communities. As I was saying, from outside. But we need to understand who we are. We are alive. We have all of life's potential. Another paradigm is co-creation. Instead of collaborating or working together, it's rather how we create together. In this case, paradigm isn't about how we can do better, but what abilities I have as a university, as a student. Vicente said that we need to be there as universities. What is the new role to be played by universities? Who do we need at those universities? What should be happening with these collaborative networks? Another approach we use is this one with scales. Maybe we have an advisory board, an organization, a university, or 10 people in total. And we want to solve something, maybe through an agreement, a transformation, focused. Maybe my team is a department, a university department, that's a part of this organization, that's working within a system in Tenerife, that's also part of the social system within an ecological system within a bioregion, which is the island. When we work with strategy and systemic thought processes, we need to understand that transformation requires understanding who the different stakeholders are. If we aim for projects that surpass us, we will be overwhelmed. We need to understand the reality of the place, and we need to find the necessary partners, the stakeholders that will help us to make this project feasible and carry it out successfully. Now here we can see the answer capacity from a perspective of scale. This is a transnational business from my city, and in the first two parts you can see the material aspects that the company can solve. All the other 4 points, which has to do with the bioregion, with the system in which this company can be found, these are aspects that the company needs to have in order to survive, but they will never be able to solve them on their own, no matter how much money they have. They need to work together with other sectors. They need to collaborate with other stakeholders. It seems like we're forgetting about it, but we need to do it, to work together on governance, to understand who we need to work with, who we need to be, who we need to join forces with. From my perspective, and of course I'm Mexican, so we always try to find those points where the system is not reaching. When we find a set of rules, we have to contrast it with reality. The tools need to change, but we can't wait for years and years, maybe 3 years, for another Congress with the different political parties finally agree and then start. No. We only need to know what we're aiming for and what path we need to follow. Here you can see, and it has been mentioned before many times, we need to work as an ecosystem, as a network. We need experts to assess us, which we have done until now. Usually we get the assessment by experts and then we tell it to the government. However, we should interlink all these different agents so that it's not a linear process. Well, I'm almost finished. I can share some great examples, success stories, but also some failures that really hurt, but you learn from them. I've learned to let things go, but we need to build a common purpose. However, this cannot be the minimum common denominator. We need to understand, we need to see that star, that northern light of what we are envisioning, of where we want to go. If not, we won't be able to cross the ocean. If we just try to survive, then we will perish. We will not reach any point at all. In my case, in Massachusetts, we work with over 120 representatives of different sectors, of workers' unions, of charities, of governments. And that network is still alive. Here you can see how interlinked it is. They found their own hubs. And people might now be surprised by what I'm going to say. Indigenous children, after 3 hours of learning about this process, are able to work on sustainable processes. We have worked with women from Nicaragua who had no official passport, they were stateless, and they've also been able to learn how to work on these processes. At times they would become frustrated and they wouldn't understand how to work with it, but we will tell them tomorrow we will be able to work on it with the people making the decisions. So we try to bring all of the stakeholders together, and in Massachusetts they understood that this is all intellectual property or common knowledge, and we then try to divide it into 5 aspects we need to solve on short term. All 120 of us need to share resources in order to achieve projects, to create projects that will move the system with these 5 pillars. If we want to create a purpose, we need to understand where the different sectors are in relation to that purpose. if one sector won't support us, then at least we want to neutralize it. It has happened in New Orleans, and also in Massachusetts. Usually, when a sector or the government doesn't want to participate, usually we don't start with them. Usually, our projects start off with an alliance between the private sector and citizens and communities. We need each other. We create that alliance, and later on, the government might become interested in the initiative. So we don't start with them. We do not wait for authorizations. We have to start on this. We have to define what we think is possible and come together. So here you can see another example of a system. Here you can see what municipalities, government, private initiatives manage. And once we have that map, we can see what we can create. However, this takes time. For a really strategic governance, we need time and will. And these sectors need to work hand in hand. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. I would like to ask a question, maybe not to you, maybe not to the audience, maybe just ask away to the universe. This co-creation paradigm you mentioned, this governance on urban scale, on a regional scale, from the communities, might it become something that we do not need to force, that we are a part of voluntarily? Maybe it could become instead of a modus operandi, a modus vivendi. Cristina also mentioned how we can maybe start off not from a disastrous vision, because that doesn't invite action. Like Joanna Macy said in this work that we connect, we have to work together with this basis of possibilities, not of doom. It might seem like a naive space to close up this panel, but maybe if we do not want to be a part of the problem, we can be a part of the solution. It's a naive statement, but I think it rings true. We should feel empowered to really find what we want to be, how we want to be a part of the solution. Now I would like to give the floor to the audience. Before that, I would like to transmit one last question that might summarize everything we've talked about. We are running out of time. It's not our fault. It's how things are. And I would like for us to reflect on something that has been mentioned across the different presentations. Who are those stakeholders? Who are the people that have to sit down and talk to each other, who have to enable for this dream to come true? And if we what other obstacles have we found along the way? What other hurdles? And where can we do this advocacy work? Puedo seguir, pero si quieres hacemos turno más corto. Yeah, after what Vanessa just shared, it's going to be a bit difficult to add anything to that, but it really depends on the context. We need to understand the preparation of contexts. We need to prepare that context. We need to work on relationship building between the different stakeholders so that we can strengthen the relations, so that they can find that purpose, as my colleague just mentioned. And even while preparing for the context and for strengthening those relations, we need to create the necessary learnings, the social learnings by all the stakeholders, even for those who are maybe just there to support them. At times we don't know how to support them. We have some previous conceptions or misconceptions about how to be there for them. But in that previous preparation, we adapt to the context. And these stakeholders should become more important in that process. While strengthening those relationships, we do know that there usually are some hurdles can happen. Usually it is not an easy task to find one purpose, to define one purpose. Usually we will find many different interests, at times in contradiction with each other. While creating an itinerary, we might find that there are different perspectives on how we could solve a problem or another. Natalia and us too, for some time now, we have become obsessed on how our methodological approach, the way in which we support the process, can lead to these learnings, and that these learnings are available for everyone. At times, when we decide on working on these sorts of projects, we think that everyone are at the same level. They all have the same starting point. That they're all in the same situation, and that they can all just come and sit at the table in the same way. However, the world is much more complex than that. So we really need to prepare and design the launch of these projects so that everyone has not only the same opportunities, but equity in the way they can participate, so that any institution, any community, any entity can participate and add something positive, that it has a positive impact, not a negative one. And that's one of the main challenges. When we build a method, we need to find a way to build a method that is more and more plural, where more people can see themselves mirrored in the creation of the tools, of the processes. That's really linked with the how, with answering how we're going to support them and how we can also support these organizations, these entities. And as Vanessa said before, how we can translate that experience into other realities. How we organize experience, knowledge, all the learnings we make, so that it's simple, it's straightforward, and accessible to other people. How we can adapt it to other realities. So I'm convinced that we can do a lot together. At times, reality knocks at the door and asks for us to be quick and with our solutions, but we still need to ask, to demand time. We need time to adapt to people, to adapt to their context, to create the best possible approaches. We need to transform in order to improve. Some of us who have been working on this for a longer period of time, we have seen how change can happen. People have been able to move forward, to move closer to that purpose. Maybe not achieve it, but move closer to it. Along the way, they've probably had to change course a few times, but still, they've maybe had to wear different hats along the way. But during that time, they've been able to move closer to the purpose and to create transformative processes.
positiva y me preocupa, ¿no? Ver de qué forma las comunidades pueden ser cada vez más capaces.
So I look forward to how communities are becoming more and more important in these processes as they have learned how to generate these learnings through their experience, through the history. These learnings are the best heritage possible they could offer to future generations. Maybe in a neighborhood, on a local scale, in a coverable scale. That's where we can be the most useful. Thank you.
So, I agree with everything Vicente said. I don't want to repeat anything he said, so I will be very brief. So the challenge, I think, these are clear. My colleagues have said that we all need to be present. There can't be processes that leave people behind. And if I had to make a wish to find a solution to one problem, I don't want to be politically incorrect here, but I would ask for an administration to be capable of understanding the problems of the 21st century, because they seem to see a very antiquated vision of reality from the 19th or 20th century. They seem to look through a pair of glasses that makes them see things in different ways. They might look at a wall and say, that's not a wall, it doesn't have any concrete in it, it's not a wall, for example. And because of this way of seeing things, administrations destroy projects from the very outset. If something doesn't fit perfectly in one particular sector or area, then they will say that they don't know where to put it, and so it has no future. So I don't know if that's perhaps politically incorrect, Carlos. Well, I'd say to the governments, just stay out of it. Stop getting involved. We're not asking you to do anything, but just don't ruin other people's work. And don't stop those projects that don't fit perfectly into all of your boxes. And please, let's make these changes as quickly as possible. Just a couple more things I'd like to say. I think one big challenge is for people to feel capable of creating transformation at societal level. We feel often incapable of doing this. Leaders in private initiative and social and civil society are very rare. And I'm not talking about cognitive intelligence. The real talent that these people have is their commitment to doing things in a different way, and the bravery to do it, to see it through. So that's one thing. Have the will and the bravery necessary. And this could be individuals in government, in civil society, wherever. What we need are people who believe in their dreams. The other challenge, in my view, is that I feel that we've become used to being quite inactive and not using the scientific tools that we have at our disposal and integrating them into our process designs. I don't want to use negative language here, but I've seen with my own eyes development plans, agendas that are built using very old tools that don't honour the true complexity of life. So there's a lot to explore. We have a lot at our disposal. So it's will, it's a desire to use science. And I want to ask you as well here, what are the challenges that we are facing that require transformation? Well, thank you, everybody, for sharing your experiences and leaving us with more questions than answers. We've got 5 minutes now for questions. Perhaps anyone has, perhaps there are questions in the audience. Please be brief. I don't have a question, but I'd like to tell you about a personal experience I had. I started working in the southeast part of Las Palmas and Güemes, and I witnessed a triangle of misery. People were ashamed to be from that area. They had big problems with water, which they did resolve. They put in place a strategic plan, and 20 years later, people are proud to live in this part of the island. And then one day, a guy called me from Valsequillo, a small town of 15,000 inhabitants in Gran Canaria. And he asked me about this project in the southeast. This call came from an individual, not a collective. And he asked us to take a similar project to his town. And we presented it to the mayor. The mayor agreed with the plan, and they called me back. It was a very basic plan that we put together, but we focused a lot on communication and participation. The first step we did was get a group of civil servants from that town hall. The interpreter can't hear the speaker. It's working again now. The people listening online won't be able to hear you if the microphone's not working. Thank you. Well, I want to share this because it's an interesting story. So we got together these groups of civil servants in 9 round tables. We selected these people randomly. And we had people like the cleaner of the building sitting next to the municipal architect, for example. They were all civil servants. And in these working groups, they talked about the different issues on the table. We started at 5 p.m. and at 9 p.m. we had to kick them out because they wouldn't stop talking. The end result was that the basic plan that we put forward was hugely enriched, and the mayor decided that the civil servants had to align their work with this strategic plan. And eventually, in the ceremonial room, all of the politicians announced the project before the neighbours, and they all pledged their commitment to it. And this all began with a group of neighbours who got together in one individual's house. Well, thank you. We're talking about public governance. This is a great example of community governance. I'm not sure if we have time for another question, Carlos. There's a question at the back of the room. I know we have very little time, so just to say that these terrible provisions that we saw from Vanessa in 15 years' time, these catastrophes, well, the young people here, please work to try to prevent these catastrophes. Use your PhD theses to address all of these, this foreboding. Well, not only young people, I would say, Jose Luis, also adults need to be working to try to prevent these crises, or just young people. I think actually the best thing would be to work together across all generations. There is this awful idea that the young people are going to have to resolve our problems, but that's not a very good gift that we're leaving them. I think we need to also involve people of a more advanced age because they have a lot of experiences to bring to the table. We often ignore these individuals in a lot of our processes because well, oftentimes those of us that make decisions haven't ever really encountered any really difficult situations in our lives, but our parents and our grandparents have. They've experienced wars, migrations, famines. We need to include these people. We tend to leave them by the wayside, but they are valuable to help us to face up to all series of scenarios. Yes, that's something that I wanted to talk about as well, actually. I want to say to the students here that I spent a lot of time theorizing, coming up with lots of ideas, but I didn't know how to implement any of these ideas. And it wasn't until I started working with people who were in their 60s and 70s, and actually Concepcion Landa, one of these women, is listening to me right now. Real maestros for me, real mentors. And it was only when I began to collaborate that things started to happen. No one was going to listen to me, a 33-year-old person, and a woman, a Mexican at that. But when I began to form alliances with these people, apart from everything that I learnt from them as well, that was when things started to happen. I actually built friendships with those people. We have a lot to share. And as Vicente said, people of these generations have really experienced tragedy in their lives. Another thing I wanted to say is that oftentimes, in my experience, we don't need more money to achieve these big plans. What we need is better organization. Often money is an excuse given to reject project proposals. What we need, though, is to take a little bit of time to think, to understand what's going, to build these intergenerational, intersectoral relationships. And that will help us to be efficient with the resources that we do have. Well, thank you very much. We're going to have to bring this session to a close. It's been a real privilege to share this table with you this afternoon. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone who's listened to this session that it was an absolute pleasure. Let's continue to create revolutions at a local level where we are. Thank you very much, and a big round of applause.